Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Author's Best Friend podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and I am here today with my bestie, Sierra Spencer. Sierra, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a tropical cherry hard seltzer.
Yum. 20s, I'm having a raspberry lemonade hard seltzer. For those of you that are new here, Sierra is my real life bestie, and she's my workplace life partner, my author bestie. She's also my matron of honor. And she has been a busy little bee. She's been helping me plan wedding things, writing manuscripts for school. And she's also just been casually writing a new book. It's called Model Behavior. And it comes out on June 22nd. And guys, let me tell you, I'm smitten right now because not only did we just get proofs in, I'm literally holding a physical copy of the book in my hands, but I finished edits. I don't know, what was that, maybe like a week ago? My first round of edits. And I told Sierra, she was like, okay, I think I finished it. Here you go. And I said, okay, maybe give me 2 weeks. Actually, this past Sunday would have been my deadline. So maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I was like, give me 2 weeks. That should be plenty of time for me to get through it. And I got it, and I was like kind of busy. And then I laid in bed that night and was just like, well, just whatever. I'll look at the Kindle version just to get my feet wet. And I had read the first couple chapters before a couple of times. And I got maybe 7 chapters in and started leaving notes in the Kindle version to transfer over to a Word document. And that was maybe, I think, a Friday maybe. And the next day I sat down for 12 hours and finished the book. I ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I don't know, maybe all friends have this moment where you're like, your bestie does something and you're just like, I have such a girl crush on you right now. Like, I can't believe you just did that. Like, that's so cool that you did that. Like, this whole time I'm reading this, like, this is not your first book. We've done this 2 times now. And I couldn't believe how hard it was for me to actually be an editor. I found myself wanting to just read it. And it was so hard to come back and be like, no, okay, we're looking for typos here. Like, stay on track. Like, there were just so many scenes that I hadn't read. And I was so excited to get to see them for the first time. And so I think you'll be able to hear my excitement in this podcast today because I'm just so giddy about the book, and everybody else should be too. We're a little over a month now, but it's coming, and she's a doozy. She'll take you right over. So why don't you give us a sexy little blurb? What is Model Behavior about? Who are Liam and Serena?
Yeah, so Model Behavior is about Liam Richter, who's just been made captain of the New York Islanders, and Serena MacPherson, who is a supermodel. And so they both live in New York. And when Liam gets appointed captain of his hockey team, his agent convinces him it would be a good idea to do a magazine shoot for GQ. And so Liam really would rather be doing anything else than a magazine shoot, but he is also a pushover. So he gets talked into doing this. And it's on the shoot where he's having just a really hard time. He has a lot of sensory problems. And so he just is really overwhelmed. And so luckily someone had anticipated this might happen. So they invited Serena to come and do a shoot with him, who just makes his life a lot easier. And so they do a little bit of the shoot together. And then once the magazine comes out, everyone is obsessed with them. And so they're shipping them. They're really excited about them. And so their publicists or their agents convince them that they should fake date. And that's where our story begins.
It's genius. Where does that come from? You gave us a workplace romance in academia, and then you gave us a hockey romance, and then you gave us gut-wrenching pain in Connor Bay. And so where did this idea of fake dating is so good, and you've just elevated it with these, PR type relationships. So where did this idea come from?
This is a good question. I think that it was around the time that obviously people were really obsessed with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. And so everyone thought that was a PR relationship. I mean, I was not one of those people, but it was very exciting for me.
How dare they?
How dare they? But I had also I don't know. I feel like this one was actually one of those ones that I don't actually know how it came to be. Maybe it was this amalgamation of thinking about PR relationships and why they work. And then I also had this brief hyperfixation on Barbara Palvin and Dylan Sprouse. And they had just got married, and Barbara is a supermodel. And so I don't know, maybe it was that. And then I talked about this in my most recent newsletter, but The idea for this book came to me while I was driving back with my husband from Christmas with my in-laws, and it was just like I was listening to Tate McRae on the ride home, and like I have no idea what about Tate McRae. It was just like, yes, fake dating hockey player. I mean, hockey player makes sense. Tate McRae used to date a hockey player, but then I decided that a supermodel would be a good fit to that, and I didn't know exactly if I would love to write that. I don't really know anything about supermodels or the day-to-day of a professional hockey player, but I figured, people write about hockey players all the time, so maybe I could figure it out. But yeah, so I don't know. I think it was just one of those, like, I thought of a scene first before a story, and I was picturing this hockey player who, like, if you think about it, hockey players get conned into air quotes, into doing like sponsorships and shoots all the time, but really they're just paid to play hockey, like a sport. And so like that can't be that fun for them. Like it's not really their job. And so I was thinking about that and how like awkward it must be to have to do that when you have no experience doing that, right? Like imposter syndrome to the max. Like I glide around the ice on like these knives and like hit things into a net. Like what am I doing behind a camera? And so chapter 1 became that thought process. And yeah, then it kind of just wrote itself. Serena and Liam have such very distinct personalities that it was easy to write them.
Yeah, I was going to ask about like a hockey player with like sensory sensitivities. Like if that feels very unique as like a standalone. But yeah, I guess if you think about the fact that like not only is it, it's like a popular sport that people watch, but also like the men are known for being like pretty... I don't know if you'd say that hockey players are known for being hot in the way that like maybe like a baseball player is. Like oftentimes it's like they probably don't have all their real teeth, or like they get like kind of messed up. But like at least for me, who's someone who's not on social media a lot, the exposure I do have to hockey is all their stretching, which I'm super here for, and like that's fun. And they also just seem to have like good, like they're really aggressive on the ice, but maybe kind of more like fun-loving personalities. And so there's something very interesting about a hockey player. But did the idea to give him sensory sensitivities like come from this thought of like, well, it must be really awkward to then all of a sudden be put in a situation where a lot of people are looking at you like they are in the hockey arena, but it's in a space that you're not totally comfortable with? Or is that something like, had you always thought about writing a character who is maybe just very overwhelmed in the day-to-day experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I don't know if I ever thought I would do it. I think that I get pretty overstimulated in like real like new contexts or places where like there's a bunch of new people, and I could just see how it would be overwhelming for someone who they didn't really even have to be there, and so now they're here and they have to do the thing because people are counting on them, and so like that felt like, I don't know, something I hadn't seen I read a lot of books, and I hadn't seen something like that in a book. And I felt like, I don't know, my husband also gets pretty overstimulated in new situations, and we both have like weird sensory things. And so it felt like it would be easy to write about from that perspective. Like I can't like describing the feeling that Liam gets of like, like his skin is itchy and it's warm, and he's just like, I'm so overstimulated, I can't do this. Felt like normal. And sometimes when I'm trying to write characters, I try to latch onto some piece of normal that I know about, so that way it makes it easier for me to try to generalize that to other situations. Like I don't know anything about being a hockey player, but I do know a lot about being overstimulated, and so so it's easier to write Liam when I can like attach to some part of his personality. Maybe that didn't answer your question, but
no, it does. And I think it was so interesting because he's not, I don't know if you would say like the very maybe sort of typical like overthinker guy that pays a lot of attention to things is maybe like your golden retriever type mailman character. And I wouldn't really classify him as that. Like he still has like a pretty tough demeanor, and he's still pretty intense, and like he is kind of like, he's fun loving in certain contexts, but most of the time he's just like, he's that sort of like alpha male aggression type that you have in the quintessential hockey player. But his overthinking type of mentality is like not, I think, what you would traditionally see in that role. And I think that it pairs so well. And it's the combination of that he's a hockey player, but he's also having to be exposed to this new lifestyle where everyone is looking at him more so than just him on the ice. And it just like, like you just said, you don't know anything about the inner minds of a hockey player, but you know about overstimulation. Like reading it at least is just kind of like it feels like, yes, that's exactly how you would feel in that situation. Like, this is very overwhelming, and like, I don't want this person touching me, or I am feeling really hot and uncomfortable on my skin. And like, yeah, it feels like this is a human experience for somebody who isn't even famous. And then when you think about it in that context of a hockey player, it's like, yeah, that feels like that is how that would be in that circumstance. Like, please don't look at me. Please don't. Like, I feel much more comfortable in my uniform. Can I put that on and stand here and talk with you? Like, that's way more my speed. But then you also said that this was like a sort of like a nod to the classic rom-coms, and like you wanted it to feel like a rom-com played out in a book. And I'm wondering, like, aside from just the fact that there's romance and comedy in it, like, what were some of those like really important pieces that you had included to make you feel like this makes me feel the same way I feel when I would watch like those classic romantic comedies that we all love?
Yeah, I mean, nothing hits quite as good as like good banter in a rom-com. Like, if a rom-com has good banter, like it's an immediate like comfort watch. Like, set it up with Glenn Powell and, oh gosh, is it Zoe Dutch maybe, I think. And they just have such good chemistry on screen together, and they're so funny, and it's just like everything they do is exciting, and they're like assistants or something, right? So like their job isn't that exciting. But yeah, so it's like, I feel like good chemistry between characters, unlike the other books I've written before, which is just sort of like mostly character-driven development. And then like sometimes they're funny, like sometimes they tell a joke, or sometimes they just like, there's like a really good setup for something. This one felt like I was trying to write a romantic comedy heavy on the comedy, but I can't escape like a lot of my roots. So it's like, there's comedy, but then there's like these like, it feels like you're on a roller coaster a little bit, where the highs are really high and the lows are really low. Like, Serena talks about having these things that she's dubbed her dark days, and Liam has all these sensory problems that he's like constantly trying to deal with. And like, it makes him think that he can't ever fit in Serena's life because she's always doing those things, and he like feels like he can't. And so you get like really high highs of like Serena and Liam having this off the charts chemistry, and they jive so well together, and their conversations flow really easily. And then you also get these like, we are just two completely different people, and like that really impacts like how we think about the world.
Yeah, I honestly, you nailed it, because it feels like the like all of those cute, giggly, like funny, cheeky moments from like one of my favorite rom-coms, like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It feels very like the witty banter, and even though the plot line is all very different, you get the sort of like comedic sweetness, but then you also have this layer of like Devil Wears Prada, like watching a movie about a lifestyle that maybe you really know nothing about, or something that's all very glamorous, like getting that like behind the scenes sort of feel. Like, I don't know if I'd really say I care very much for the romance at all, and that movie it kind of depresses me a little bit, but I love the fact that you get all this behind the scenes stuff of working in fashion, and so it feels like a nice intersection of those two things. And yeah, I feel like I feel like I learned so much from you about the lifestyle of like a model, and I have asked you before, like, how do you know about this? But maybe just for the general audience, like, what was your research practice? Like, how did you get into the mind of a model?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if I did, right? Like, in theory, like maybe models actually don't experience the life of Serena MacPherson, and that would be fine, right? I'm not pitching myself as a model, but I do think that they live pretty interesting lives, in that models exist in like our everyday, and like only some of them do you know their name, like Gigi Hadid or Gisele Bündchen, and like what makes those models different than like the models that you see on a like American Eagle catalog or like something like that. And so growing up, I used to watch The Hills like religiously. The Hills is like a show about Lauren Conrad, who is not a model, but she worked in fashion, and she worked for Teen Vogue. And then I watched Whitney Port's spinoff, which is The City, and she was working for Kelly Catrone in New York. And I just like loved that. I loved watching it. I loved like the inner workings of fashion shows, and learning how stylists like work with PR companies to put on fashion shows. And I thought that was very cool. I don't know what it is. I guess it's sort of like interest in a life that you would never live yourself. Like, it's just like, oh, that would be like, I would never want to be a model for a day or even like half a second. Like, that seems so stressful. But it's interesting to think about how they live their lives. And then when I decided to make Serena a supermodel, one of the things that I did a lot was like watch like a model day in the live vlogs like on TikTok and like read a lot of interviews with like Karlie Kloss and Gigi Hadid and Adriana Lima and all of those gals. Just to see what it was like what their perspective was on like being a very well-known model in New York and all of those things. So that was a lot of my research process, was just like really like trying to uncover primary sources for them, which would come in the form of interviews and stuff like that.
I see. And is there feedback like you feel pretty normal most of the time and then you go out and like a bunch of people are taking your picture, or like are they actively aware that they're famous and a big deal like all the time?
It doesn't seem like, what I gathered from that or from doing that research is like sort of like no, like you're expected to be places and take photos and represent brands. And like depending on actually who you're friends with or who you're dating or like what's happening in the media, that's when you start to notice those things. And so like if a bunch of models hung out together, then like that's when you get the attention. Or like, I don't know, if someone really likes you, then maybe, or you're having like a moment in the media, then people are sort of following you around. But for the most part, it's sort of like you get to live your everyday life, but it's really regimented and you're always like sort of moving from one place to the other.
And so you said that the book started with a scene and you have this really, really lovely GQ shoot that like if somebody out there after it's out and you've read it has the willpower to put it down after chapter 1, you should contact me because I would like to study you, because it's just real. And like, it's assuming that you don't have a life event that you have to put it down for. It's too hard. Like the scene is too good. You have to know more. It's such a good scene. Like, and I feel like, at least from watching like Taylor and Travis, you just eat up the cute pictures of her like after a concert and they're hugging, or him after a game and they're hugging, and they're like out at an after party dancing. You have a couple of scenes in here that are very cute. Like, this is what you would see for a famous couple that's out doing things. And I, just for fair warning, authors who are listening to this, I don't go around just spoiling scenes. I've asked Sierra's permission to bring this scene up, but you have this very cute scene of Serena and Liam talking about plays in hockey and like what the names are for those, and like she's sort of being quizzed on, do you know what these phrases mean, these hockey type phrases? And I think that was probably I think I know that there's a lot of lingo in sports. I do live with a man. I recognize those things. I hear them all the time. And I'm like, I have no idea what a barn burner is, but cool. But like, that was the first time I think I realized that hockey feels like an entire different language sometimes, which is a very cute play on that, because there are so many words that you're like, I couldn't even venture a guess of what that means. And one of my favorite things to do with you when planning on a book is to talk about these scenes. Like, they just, even if none of them even end up in the book, just the process of like, oh my God, what if you did this? Or what if the scene would be really cute? And so I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about that scene in preparation, and also maybe a little bit about what your research for that looks like, because now you've moved into, got the model stuff down, but now it's like really deep in the hockey culture, not just like how plays work and line changes and all that kind of stuff, but just actually how hockey players communicate with one another.
Yeah. I mean, that scene was really fun to write. And I think, I guess the idea from that originally came from mostly being on hockey TikTok. Like in my everyday, my husband and I watch hockey. We like to go to hockey games and things like that. And so like, it's just sort of a side effect that I end up on hockey TikTok. And also I'm doing research for this book, so it's more prevalent. And there was a trend for a while where people would interview hockey players or interview their girlfriends about particular hockey slang. Like, if you, like, I'm going to give you like a phrase and you have to tell me what you think it means, right? And some of it was just like not even people related to hockey players. It was just like, you're in line for this game, so I'm going to interview you or whatever. And so I thought it would be really cute to have a scene.
Wait, they do that? That'd be so embarrassing. You're in line for this game. Can you tell me what this means? No. Yeah. Please move on.
Like, when you're outside, I don't know, maybe you're not on these sides of TikToks where it's just like anxiety trivia or something. But like people will do it outside of concerts. Like during the Eras tour, it was like, like name 2 songs off Folklore, and people were like, I don't know how to do that, or like, I don't know.
I know the
It was
answer, but
just-
my anxiety is so loud right now.
Yeah, I don't know how I mean, I like trivia, so maybe that's how I ended up on the side of trivia talk, where it's like now this weird mixture of everything plus trivia. But a lot of the times it was just like either like a hockey girlfriend or wife being quizzed on hockey terms, or the reverse, like, hey, what does this mean? And you get like an explanation from a hockey player or whatever. And so I thought that would be really cute to like write a scene in this. So like one thing about Serena is like she doesn't follow hockey. Like she has no idea about anything. And so a cute theme throughout this book is just like her trying to learn as much as she can about this thing that is now apparently very important. And so, and they also have to do like social media things. Like hockey social media has become such a huge thing because of TikTok, but mostly book talk, right? Because there's a bunch of hockey romances. And so like someone on the team convinces Liam to get Serena to do this video with him. And so it's their social media coordinator or whatever asking Serena questions about them while Liam is there. And so Liam has to tell her if they're right or wrong. And so you get these really cute, like Liam being pleasantly surprised that she knows this thing, or like, oh no, that's not even close. I don't even know how you got there. Moments which are just so fun and so cute.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that you were going to write this scene. And so I like Googled hockey phrases and was trying to help like think of super wrong guesses that people might have, just like based on the word. And those sorts of things are so fun. Like I love reading those things in books where they have like a little scene. I was like, that took you a little bit. Like that took you some creative thought process to think about what exactly this person was going to say. And like Serena's wrong guesses, you could tell are like, they're very thoughtful based off of like, you know, in sports, you should be able to maybe kind of guess based on the name. It maybe seems kind of obvious, but that scene is very cute and feels very like a model in a very normal environment. Like she feels like a very normal girlfriend. It's very cute.
Models, they're just like us.
Yeah, they're just like everybody else.
They have no idea what an apple is or whatever. Out of context, that sounds terrible. Like, what is an apple? What is apple?
No, Serena is very intelligent. She's smart. She knows what an apple is. Apple is a hockey phrase.
The other thing that I thought of other than apple was bucket, and that also is confusing. Like, why wouldn't she know what a bucket is?
Bucket is also a hockey phrase? Could they just
like
make up words instead? Like, could you not take existing words? We would appreciate it.
The other thing I wanted to say about this was like the second part of this conversation that actually never made it into the book, which is like hockey chirps. Like I was really interested to see what would start a hockey fight. And like what they're even saying, like they fight a lot. So like what are they saying to each other on the ice? And some of the hockey players get like mic'd up or whatever sometimes. And so I was
Please
like,
tell me they're like your mom jokes.
Literally, like I mean, they're probably not all of them, but the ones that I was listening to are just like, like you're bad at hockey, like immediate fight. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like that's all it took. Is you're kind of bad at hockey, or like I don't know, you could like stand in the like fan section and like people will yell about at you and you're not gonna fight them.
So they're not actually very witty. It just doesn't take very much.
It was like, I mean, I'm sure that there are probably like lower blows or whatever, at least according to hockey romances there are, right? Like sometimes I read a hockey romance and there's like, I don't know, always a scene where another hockey player says something about the girl he's dating or whatever, and then they get into a huge fight. And I'm like, based off this TikTok situation, like that's not what's happening.
I don't even think you needed to cut that deep. You could have just stuck with like, I think your skates are untied.
Right. Like you can't hold your hockey stick. Like who tapes that for you? Your mom.
Oh man. So do you get the sense that they're like actually friends? Like I thought this was so interesting, like in football, which is probably the sport I grew up watching the most, is that like mostly because people get traded so much. So it's like, oh, so you play with these people, but like I don't understand getting in a physical altercation and then being like, hey bro, we're cool. Like that was a good tackle. Like I can't even wrap my mind around that. In hockey, the fights are so much more aggressive than like, you know, a tackle and then maybe you push them after, like in football or something. Like, do you get the sense that they do it and it's like kind of fun, like we just kind of chirped at each other and got in a little fight, or like they're actually like, no, I'm pissed?
I think it could be both of those things at the same time, actually. Like, you can, I don't know how. I mean, it's just like, it seems like that, right? So, like, some of the interviews, like, some people ask hockey players about that. Like, hey, you got into a fight with this guy. Like, what do you think about that? And he's like, oh, he's like a good friend. Like, you can't, it's just like, in the heat of the game or the moment or whatever, like, it's easy to like get tunnel vision there. But then I'm trying to reconcile that with like, you suck at hockey. And I'm like, you could have said anything, I guess, at that point, like, and it would have set them off, right? And so, yeah, both things. I think both things are true. One thing that came up around the time of the All-Star game this year was like people asking about fights, like to like Matt Barzal and Connor McDavid, and it's sort of like you see them at the All-Star game, like you see them in charity games, like you see them, like you all play together on the same team sometimes, right? Some of those guys like go on to play for like the like American Olympic team or the Canadian Olympic team. And so like they all have to sort of be friendly with each other. And so I think that some fights are like, actually there's like a rivalry. Some fights are like, oh, this guy's just like hot-headed, right? Like the Kachuk brothers, I think they always get into fights. Brady Kachuk in particular went to BU, which is where I went, and he was always in a fight with someone. And so I was like, maybe he'll cool off when he gets to the NHL. No, incorrect. He was part of that giant, like, everyone gets like everyone is benched. Like, everyone is benched for 10 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, that tracks. It's pretty Kachuk. Anyway, so I think it's a mixture of things. Like, they're probably all mostly friends, and some players just like are more easily like talked into getting to a fight, and it could be like a tiny chirp or whatever. And so anyway, that's all to say there's no actual chirps in this book. So I'm very sorry if you wanted to see a hockey fight on the ice.
Yeah, now that we're talking about this, I'm feeling like there was such a missed opportunity to make that Zendaya movie with tennis players, like a wide shoes type of, or like a love triangle situation, but with hockey players. Seems like it would be so much higher tension. Like, that seems like, because people already think that that's what's happening, right? That they're chirping because of the girl on the ice. And so why not just play that out? But two guys are competing for the same girl. I feel like that's a missed opportunity on there. And they must not know about how the hockey romance has taken Bookstagram by storm. Someone should inform them.
Yeah. Yeah, the tennis thing was interesting. And I think, I don't know if it affected the world of tennis at all, but certainly if there was like a love triangle hockey romance, people would be at that for sure.
Yeah, people read those. Well,
oh yeah,
I guess that's different. It's not a Wide Shoes, the movie. It's a love triangle in terms of like two guys fighting for the same girl, right? Those are different categories.
Wide Shoes is different than love triangle. Wide Shoes is like polyamorous relationship. Like, they're all sort of in agreement. Sometimes it starts off as like you don't know, like the guys who are getting involved with this girl don't know it's going to end up in a Wide Shoes situation. Like, actually there is this one hockey Wide Shoes. I think it's Emily Raff, and I think it's Bucking Wild, but there's two guys who are friends, but they're on opposing teams. And I could be mixing this up with another book, but I'm pretty sure that at least one of them, they're on opposing teams, but they're friends. And so like they end up in this Wide Shoes. But then there's this whole other guy from, I think, Sweden, who like literally doesn't know what's happening, but he's like, I mean, if this is what it takes, I guess it's fine. And I love that book, but it's just like most of the Wide Shoes, or at least the Wide Shoes that I've read, are just like, it's a group of friends. They've known each other for a while. Maybe they're not all hockey players. Maybe one is like the sports doctor, or one owns the team, or whatever it is. They're already affiliated in some way. And then sometimes it's just like this other guy gets thrown in there and he's like, sure, why not?
I'm easygoing. Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe I feel like love triangles aren't that popular, and maybe that's just because someone's always going to be sad. Like, the ending is always kind of sad. Like, in the ones that I can think of, it's the Pearl Harbor type situation where like you thought the person like died, or things like it ended, and then something happens where they come back. Like, maybe there's no happy endings there.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so interesting because growing up, I feel like there were a lot of love triangles, like in the like YA novels. Like, Twilight's the Love Triangle, The Hunger Games. I thought I had another one in there, but it felt like it was just like
There's
more
more.
prevalent.
I feel like there's more.
I feel like there is more, but I can't remember any of them, I guess. But yeah, and now it's like I simply would rather die than read The Love Triangle. Like I can't. Like I would rather you just make it a wide shoes in the last chapter than deal with The Love Triangle.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because you kind of did that. Like Eastern
mean?
Standard was like the haunting of a husband, and so it's like
You can't choose a ghost, Lauren.
you could die alone, sad, breathing your husband's flannels.
I think, okay, maybe this is a hot take and also a spoiler for anyone who's read Eastern Standard, but I think if I had been married to Whit and he died, I would not be with Davis.
Yeah.
It only works in one direction for me.
I mean, you would that heartbreak would kill you. You would perish. I believe that. If you lost Whit, yeah, I don't know if you would be able to come back from that one. There is no why choose. The question just becomes why. Just why.
Just why. Yeah. Yeah, no.
Yeah, well, go read Eastern Standard if that one goes over your head. Go read that book immediately. Speaking of Eastern Standard, so this is your 4th release now. Is it different in any way? Like you're in it now. Like you're an old pro. You've done the book formatting, you've done the marketing, you've done all the things. Like were you learning anything this time around, or just applying skills you've already built and getting a book put out? Is there anything? Does this feel different in any way? Obviously, with each story and each characters, it's going to reach people differently. Maybe it'll even reach a different audience. I mean, Eastern Standard was something that was a little bit newer for you, so it was interesting to see how people were going to respond to that style of writing. So, is there anything different about model behavior this time around than from your past 3?
I don't know. I guess that's a hard question to answer. I'm sure that like in the moment writing them, it felt different. I think that I've always been a pretty dialogue heavy author. Like obviously like Eastern Standard was like really reflective and like you had lots of moments in like Olivia's head and in Whit's head. But I still think that the dialogue is actually what shines the best in that book. And I think that's true for model behavior also. I don't know. I think it's like, and I can't even say it was the first time writing about careers or people that I like have no experience with because I didn't grow up in a small town. I'm certainly not a doctor. And
you write them very well though.
You'll notice he never practices on page. How to be fast.
It's not actually attending to any patients because I don't know how to do that.
Right. That's what you always go with the Sierra Spencer book is like, I'm not even going to try to really fake the profession. Even in like these shoots, it's sort of like it's never like, I guess Serena and Liam are on like they do shoots in this book, but I feel like the times that I catch them in like thought or dialogue is like between them, like when they're taking breaks or when the photographer needs something or like they're changing position. So even during it, I feel like I don't even give you that. So I guess I'm really anti like writing the actual profession. I just allude to this profession.
Well, you gave me the illusion that I learned something a lot about this profession. I feel like I know a lot about how models and athletes would interact. So even if you were just faking it till you make it, I feel like I watched this as a movie, and you didn't even tell me. Like I don't watch hockey. I love going to hockey games because of the screaming and the nachos, but you didn't even tell me like who it was until I was, I don't know, probably halfway through the book, and I don't even remember what it was, but you were like, this is the man that this is modeled after, and I was like,
oh, I remember what it is.
I was like, are we able to say it?
I remember what it was because you had sent a gif of Tyler Sagan, I think, and he was like being a weirdo, and I was like, yeah, that's Tyler Sagan, and then a Sidney Crosby scene came up in this book, and you were like, who's Sidney Crosby? And then you started to Google Sidney Crosby.
That's right.
And then actually, if you Google Tyler Sagan, a very interesting photo shoot of him comes up. And you had said, can Sidney Crosby do one of these? And I said that or Matt Barzell.
Yeah. And that's when the FBI agent that's monitoring my phone was like, oh, she wants to see hockey players stretching. And that's all I got for the next month. No complaints, FBI agent. But yeah, you were putting in overtime to help expose me to the hockey culture. That's right. Yeah. I was just trying to be like funny because there are so many like really random gifts that you can send. And so I was like, live. As I mentioned, I was editing for 12 hours straight. You were watching me edit for 12 hours straight. And so I was, trying to keep it entertaining. And so between, live comments on the Word doc and sending you text messages, I was like, oh, there's fun hockey gifts. And then, yeah, there's some good looking gentlemen on there. So that's right. That's where that came from. But all of that to say, I didn't even know what Liam was, who he was modeled after. There isn't a lot of necessarily ran my fingers through his chestnut hair or a lot of description that would necessarily make their features and stuff stick out in your mind. But it just you just know it. You see them modeling in the GQ shoot and it doesn't really matter what description you've given. You just know what they look like. You just know what's happening. And this is a very I don't want to say it's like a subtle descriptive book, but every little tiny thing of what I'm doing with my fingers and what I've done with my eyebrow and how I've shifted my body language is so telling. I mean, because you're modeling and because you're communicating as somebody who has sensory sensitivity, and they're like, this is my subtle way of telling you that I really wish I was dead right now because I'm so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's so many little pieces of that it really just helps it feels like a movie that I've seen before. This the way the scenes play out. It's you've seen something like this before and you piece it together. So reading the book, I think that's why it goes by so quickly, because it's it's one of those, which is what made editing so hard. I'm rambling so hard right now, but I told I told you guys you'd be able to tell how excited I was. It's like one of those books that you're reading and you're not even sure you really read all the words. You probably read every third or fourth word, but because you're reading it and you're like, yeah, I see it. I know this is happening. I know where this is going. I can feel it. That's what made editing so hard. And I was like, I don't know if there were any typos in those last two paragraphs. I just read right through those because I was so interested in this scene. But yeah, it just it's just so visual. The book is so visual. You can see all of it play out so hardcore. And I don't even I want to give you all the props, and I don't even know if it's because you were super extra descriptive on the scenes. It's just your mind just pops it there. You just see the couple and it places in there.
Yeah, I think that's really important to me when I'm thinking about how to turn something that feels like a rom-com into a book, where it's I want the actions to feel like you're watching them. There's this one scene, and I think this is maybe the first time that you pointed it out, or at least it's the first time in my recollection that you pointed it out, where it's the first time that Serena's watching Liam move around the apartment on a game day, and he comes back from morning skate and he has his headphones on, and I don't expressly say that they're headphones, and he's doing stuff and she's just watching him do it, and he hasn't noticed that she's there, and he finally sees her and he takes off his headphones and he's like, hey, what are you doing? And it just feels so normal. It feels you can see them do those things, and you can see how he might move around the kitchen that I've described probably multiple times in that book. And so I was okay, actually one thing that is super related to this podcast is when I was listening to Tessa's ABF podcast, she was you don't have to explain why someone is embarrassed that they just tripped in front of a crush. And I was thinking about how many times authors over or under assume knowledge of their readers. And that's one of the things I don't like about books that I hadn't realized that I didn't like about them. It's I can see the scene in my head just fine. I don't need all of these extra words to tell me exactly where things are placed. If they're not relevant, then I can just imagine them in the background myself. And so when I was writing this book, it was a lot of I don't have to re-describe this kitchen. I don't have to re-describe how Serena is sitting on the couch. You can imagine a girlfriend watching their boyfriend interact in in a shared space. And I don't need to help you do that. You're a competent reader. If you picked this up, I assume that you know how to read. So like, it's just like, however you want to envision them interacting, like that's up to you. But here's the core things that I want you to take away. I want it to be very clear that Serena is watching this happen and Liam is doing these things just as he would, like in his normal routine. And he suddenly realizes she's there. And what's that interaction like?
Yeah, you can tell that I went to work today because so many things that you were saying were just like, I was thinking about them from like a research perspective. Like, I wonder if that's some of the, like, that takes a lot of theory of mind in some ways, like to know that this is an experience I've had. I'm sure other people have had this experience. If they haven't, they could visualize what it might look like. And that's why I don't have to write these descriptions, because it'll be very clear to them what actually is playing out here. But there are other times where you'll read a scene or even, you know, an author's writing style of book is like, I wish you told me more of what they were doing. I wish I'm having a hard time actually visualizing what's happening in this scene. And I wish you told me more of that. I think is maybe the smaller part of it. The larger part actually is like, it's funny because you study violation of expectation, which is like showing babies something and then showing them something that's kind of strange and seeing how they respond. And if they respond like, oh, that's strange, then it's like, okay, that's sort of the norm. And they've been, you know, acclimated to the norm. That feels like that's like sort of my editing style. Like when I first started editing for you, like it was like, okay, I'm going to write down, this is my timeline. This is the thing that they're doing, yada, yada, yada. And I still do those things, but it's more so like, when I'm reading your book, is there anything that violated what I thought was going to happen? And if that happens, then it's like, okay, is that you or is that me? Did I miss something? And so now, like, when you say they stood up from the couch, I'm confused because I thought that they were already standing. Or is it like I'm visualizing the characters in a way that's different than how you were visualizing them? And I actually don't know if that's how most people are doing it. But like that is so strong for me, that like the way this book is playing out is so strong for me that's like, it was so sexual is not the right word, but it was hot when you were like, he walks in and you're like, he's got headphones on. And I was like, they're like AirPod Maxes, or like they're like over his ears. I know they are. I can see it. And then you're like, and then he goes to take out his headphones. And it's like, he either takes them off or he pulls them out. And he took them off. And I was like, I knew it. I knew those were those headphones. I knew he didn't pull them out of his ear. I was like, I love that. This is what I was picturing. He didn't tell me to picture this, but this is what I had in my mind, and he did it. And obviously that's like, that's silly because that's just like a very small little aspect. But like, I think that's what's so maybe not high risk to assume the knowledge of your reader, but like high risk, high reward. And that like, I'm going to spend more of my words actually telling you about who these characters are. And I'm going to hope that the writing that I've given you helps you to visualize the book. And it's so rewarding for the reader when it does. And you're just like, wow, you didn't even have to tell me that. And I saw it, and the characters were doing exactly what I thought they were doing. Like, yeah, it's sexy. It's sexual. There's a better word for it.
Yeah, you asked me earlier if I'd learned something from this book, and it's actually something like this, like something related to this, because I've been sort of spoiled with your editing in particular, because I know that if you can't picture something, I'm going to get a comment that's like, but what are they wearing? But why can't I see it in my head? Like, I need to know, like, if he's wearing a jacket, like, I need to know if he's like, I can't see it. And so it was a lot easier for me to sort of embrace this, like, Tessa Dorico sort of style of writing in a way that was like, if I mess this up too much or if I under-explained, like, you were going to catch it. Not everyone can put that faith in their editor, but I certainly do. You haven't steered me wrong yet. So yeah, a lot of that is just because I know that, like, I can write scenes like that, because if you can't picture it, then I'm not confident that somebody else might be able to picture it. Like, you live inside my brain, and if you can't like see it, then I've messed up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you know me, I'm very rare to toot my own horn. But I will say, I think I've mentioned this a few times, that like, I feel like I'm a very creative person, but putting words to paper is basically impossible. And I think it's because I could picture things so clearly in my head and like, oh my gosh, this would hit. Like, this would be so good. I actually was just standing in line today listening to some college students talking, and one of them said that that cooks. That's a good thing? That cooks? Yeah. So like for me, it's like, oh yeah, that cooks. I can see it. It's just like playing out very well. I feel so old. I feel like I'm not saying that correctly.
I think that's right, because it used to be let it cook. Like, you have to let her cook, and now it's cooked, and so now it's good.
Oh, yeah. It simmered, and now it's really good.
Yeah. Actually, the transition, it was like, let it simmer, let it cook, it's cooked. Work.
Wow. That would make sense to me. That phrase makes sense. You could see the evolution. But yeah, it's just very like, I can see these things so clearly in my mind. And so I feel like it's not like an isolated thing. I feel like other people maybe see that, but it's not, maybe you can't identify that that's the reason why the scene doesn't hit for you, because the way that the author's describing it is like, well, that's actually not how I saw those characters play out. But like one of the things I love about like the Emily Henry books is how she's always describing the posturing of her characters. Like Charlie and Book Lovers, like she describes him in one of the scenes as like lounging like he's like a jungle cat or like a jaguar or something in his chair. Yeah, and I'm like, that's so him. Like, you've described that as his personality, and it's just like, yeah, like that posturing of his body just like really reinforces that I know who this person is, and it just makes you feel more connected to the characters and more invested in what they're doing. And so there's just something so wonderful about even if it's not what you'd imagined, the author's telling you this is what I want you to imagine. Like even if it is like a violation of your expectation, but you're like, oh, that's what he's doing. Okay, like that's cool. Like that helps me get to know him a little bit better. Now in another scene where you don't describe his posture, I kind of have a sense of how he stands or how he carries himself and how he's doing this thing. And I think that just takes you up a notch. That just makes people think about your characters when they're like, laying in bed at night kind of thing.
Yeah. No, especially Emily Henry in particular. Like, one of the things that I remember, Beach Read is my favorite Emily Henry novel, but it's because of just Gus, like how Gus is as a person. And like, there's this one scene that like is arguably not even the saddest scene that she writes about him, but it's January realizing that like maybe like Gus just leans on everything. He leans in doorways. He leans like against things, like, and she says it's because like Gus is like bearing this weight of the world on his shoulders, and it's so hard that he can't even stand straight. And it hurts me every single time I think about it. And I'm like, to give a character just like a regular, like, guys leaning in doorways, hot, like put it in all the romance novels. Guy leaning in doorway because he's so sad is terrible, but I will remember it for the rest of my life.
Did she say that in the book, that like he's slouching because of this?
January says it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that hit, that cooks. That's simmered, that's boiled, that's ready. Take it off the pot, let me eat it. Yeah. This is exactly it. It's not just a posturing. Like, that's so sad. Poor Gus.
Yeah. You've read Beach Read. Maybe it didn't hurt you as much as it hurt me.
Well, yes, to be fair, I have read that book several times, but to be fair, those books are like Beach Read, and there was one other one. It was right after The Love Hypothesis. Like, The Love Hypothesis was the first romance book that I had read. And then I think you were like, oh, you liked that one. Let me show you some Emily Henry. And I think that was before I actually had an appreciation for good literature. That was before I was just eating up stories. I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. And I think Book Lovers is probably the one that I clung to and probably read multiple times. I don't remember January saying that about him, but I do remember him leaning and slouching all of the time.
Wait, I have to find it. Even if Parker edits this out. Sorry, Parker. I'm going to read this to you because it is so painful. Yeah, okay. So January's inner thoughts are, when I looked back, his left temple was resting against the door jamb. He was always leaning on something, like he couldn't bear to hold all his own weight upright for more than a second or two. He lounged, he sprawled, he hunched and reclined. He never simply stood or sat. In college, I thought he was lazy about everything except writing, and now I wondered if he was simply tired, if life had beaten him into a permanent slouch, folded him over himself so that no one could get at that soft center, the kid who dreamed of running away on trains and living in the branches of a redwood.
Okay, yeah.
So
yeah, no, yeah, I have memory of this. This is highlighted for me 100% because I have bad posture, but it's just because I have bad posture. Like, maybe I could adopt a personality.
You also broke your back, so like maybe that has something to do with your bad posture.
Yeah, possibly. that and the low self-esteem, maybe. I didn't mean that as self-deprecating as it sounded. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's so good. And it's a simple posture that tells you so much about the person's personality. And I don't even know if this is like, you probably didn't even mean to do this necessarily. This is like the red period on the Eastern Standard cover. But like,
I don't know.
Like to put somebody that's like a model whose job is to have good posture and walk around and then give insight into what's going on in their inner monologue, I think is, at least in the context of what we're talking about right now, is like, it's so beautiful. Like it's such a fun, there's lots of really fun juxtapositions in this book now that I'm thinking about it. Like I have several comments of that. Like there's so many fun comparisons between these things, but like people will get a sense of who Serena is and how she thinks. But I think that there's something, so even you haven't explicitly stated it about her being a model necessarily and how she carries herself and what her inner thoughts are. But like, yeah, I guess the takeaway here is that posturing is important for readers to get to know who your characters are, and it cooks. To put their posturing in there, it cooks. It tells them, you can tell readers something about your characters without explicitly telling them about your characters, but just by describing how they're sitting on the couch or how they're sitting in a chair or how they're leaning with the weight of the world on their shoulders.
Yeah. I feel like It Cooks is a great episode title for this, but it would make people think that it was about a chef.
It's too good. We're doing it anyway. It cooks. It cooks. I will be honest. As somebody who is an editor and also hosting a podcast, it's really fun to get behind the scenes scoop of stuff. And like there are things that aren't even recorded on the podcast, and I get to talk with authors and hear about all of the secret things that they're planning, or I get to read their work early. Maybe they send me an advanced reader copy. Honestly, it's really cool. I feel like, I know a secret that you don't know, and it's very fun to get to know things of other people. But this is a new experience for me. Reading Model Behavior, I felt really sad that other people don't get to read this book right now. Like, it's so good, and it's so, like, I don't know. It's one of those books you read and immediately pick back up and start reading again. Like Eastern Standard at least is like, my wounds need to heal a little bit, and then we can try that again. And like, Jonathan Harper, they're a little too close to home, like with academia. But like you nailed it. It's like a cute rom-com that you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could see that for the first time all over again. You read it like you just said, an Emily Henry book. You read it again and again, and then you're like, there's my highlight. There it is. Now that I've digested all the scenes, here it is. And so I feel very sad for all of the people that will listen to this episode and haven't had a chance to read Model Behavior, because you can hear the giddiness in my voice. You can hear excited I am talking about it. It is that good. And I'm not just saying this because Sierra's my bestie. I truly mean it. And so, because I feel so bad about it, I would like to share the love. And as we've already talked about, Liam and Serena love playing games. They love to, tease one another and goof around and quiz each other on hockey lingo. And so we're going to play a little game today and give 3 listeners a chance to win a signed copy of Model Behavior with some extra little goodies, and hopefully get it a little bit early. And so here's how my little game is going to work. So there are 3 details in the book that I'm going to spoil, in a sense. I'll be minor for the most part, but these details haven't been mentioned in social media about the book. And so I'm going to ask Sierra a question about these spoilers, and Sierra's going to give us one clue word, one answer response to what the answer of the question is. And the first listener that will DM the ABF Instagram account, the correct answer, will win a copy of the book and some goodies. And so there's going to be 3 questions. So 3 people are eligible to win. You can guess for all of the questions if you want, and submit as many guesses as you want, but you can only win one book. So if you get one right, then you only get one book. I know you'd love to have multiple copies, but just the one will do for now. And so once this episode comes out, it's free game. So May 28th, as soon as the episode's live, it's free to go. So send us the DMs. Okay, my first one. Everybody ready? Get your fingers ready to type. So Noah is Pretty Venom's bassist, and he wakes up in Serena's bed. What is he wearing?
Okay, my hint for this one is summer.
Okay. So Noah, Pretty Venom's bassist, wakes up in Serena's bed, and he's wearing summer. is a hint. Now, you've released the tropes of the book, and one of the tropes is forced proximity. What is the event that creates the forced proximity?
I'm going to go waiters on this one. Waders. Waiters.
Waiters. The spelling here is important.
Could you imagine? Waiters.
Waders. Waiters. Okay. Last question. Serena is fascinated with the origin of phrases, like common phrases in the book. And what is one of the common phrases that she's thinking of when she goes to meet Liam for dinner?
I think the hint for this one is going to be farm.
Farm. That's a good one. F-A-R-M. Farm.
Yeah.
Okay, so people that are listening to the podcast, send us your guesses for questions 1, 2, and 3. I mean, they're all so different, so you don't necessarily have to specify what question you're answering, but send us your guesses. The first 3 people to guess correctly will get a copy of Model Behavior that is signed by Sierra Spencer, and then some additional goodies will come with that. I'm so excited to share in my squealing. I think there's a small community of us who have read thus far, but I'm so excited to squeal with people over this book because it's so good, and it's so cute. I won't put you on the spot about what you're doing next, but I'm just so excited about this book and all these characters that you've built, not just the 2 of them, but all the side characters are wonderful. It's just so good. The cover's freaking cute. It's everything, and I'm squealing over it, and I'm so excited to have everybody else squeal over it too. So mark your calendars. June 22nd, Liam and Serena are coming for your hearts. Thank you, Sierra, for playing along. Thank you for sharing about the background between your characters. And we'll see you in June.